Welcome into a Broncos mailbag. Now, today's show was filmed during our live show, which was on Tuesday the 21st, because I'm going out of town for a week. So if you're watching this later, that's the reason why. So if anything sounds a bit dated or maybe a bit off, well, it may have happened before I knew about it. So with that, let's jump into our first question today, coming in from Maxwell. Do you think that we should trade Randy Gregory and Courtland Sutton for maybe a second-round pick and a fourth-round pick? An interesting question here. I don't think they're in the business of trading Gregory. I think George Paton wants to stand by that free agent contract he gave out, and he wants to see it work out in the long run here. I think if Randy Gregory is a bit of a bum this year in terms of his production, he could be on the way out after that. As for trading Courtland Sutton, I don't want to say that's more than likely to happen because that's definitely a long stretch, but it's definitely got some legs to it. I think the Broncos, with only 5 picks in the draft, if they get the right offer for Courtland Sutton from a wide receiver needy team that doesn't want to wait for a rookie to develop, but they want to win right now, it could be a pretty good match made in heaven. DCX Viper, trade Simmons and a third for a second pick be reasonable? Oh, is trading Simmons for a third or a second reasonable? Okay. Yeah. Justin Simmons, I think, goes for at least a second-round pick, in my opinion. Why? Because he's one of the best safeties in football. Now, safety as a whole, as a position group, is not one you tend to build around. They're usually easily replaceable. It's why you don't see a ton of safeties go in round 1 of drafts usually. But I think you're not going to get a first for him. The Jamal Adams deal kind of scared teams off from a first-rounder for safeties. But I think a second is very much in the play for Justin Simmons. I wouldn't do that. I think there's a line to be drawn in terms of wanting to retool and move some of your assets, move some of your players for picks. Justin Simmons is on the other side of that line. He's with Patrick Surtain and Jerry Jeudy, of guys you build around, right? Other players, maybe they're more expendable. Broncos forever. I saw on Twitter the idea of trading Courtland Sutton for Zach Wilson. Thoughts? I saw this too. I think it was Benjamin Albright who proposed the idea. He also tossed in like Mims and some other 2 pieces, but the big names were Courtland Sutton and Zach Wilson. Now, Zach Wilson in his career, the second overall pick from BYU, I don't think I had to color this picture much more. 4,000 yards, 15 touchdowns, 18 interceptions, and 22 starts. He's got some character issues. He definitely lost his own locker room for a stretch last year. He was benched in favor of a guy named Mike White and Joe Flacco, who probably didn't even know he was out of retirement. Now, Courtland Sutton, on the other hand, when you look at his last 4 seasons, he did have 1 missing season, and we'll throw his stats on in a moment. But in 2022, just 1 touchdown. Remember, he got extended last year in November. He's played over a season since then, and he's only scored 2 touchdowns. Like, he has not lived up to the extension, and it's a bummer because I'm wrong. I was wrong about it. I liked the extension at the time. 2019 breakout, over 1,000 yards. Unfortunately, in 2020, he only played in that 1 game in week 2, torn ACL. But afterwards, he just has not been the same, and they have been chasing that 2019 season. And at this point, it feels like they're chasing their shadow. So should Denver trade Courtland Sutton, whether it's for Zach Wilson to back up Russell Wilson and potentially get, at one point what was viewed as the second best quarterback in the draft for way less than you usually need to get use to get the second best quarterback in the draft, and it could be the handoff from one Wilson to the next. I can see the thinking behind it. I just think Zach Wilson sucks. Derek Simpson, should the Broncos sign Michael Thomas? It seems inevitable that the Saints are going to be moving on from him. His cap hit this year in New Orleans is like something like $60 million. And no, that's not a joke. So the Saints definitely need to rework some things / probably just end up cutting him. Michael Thomas has not played football for like 3 years at this point. The one-time slant king would have been it's going to be a really big name on the market. Not sure you're ever going to see that production, that NFL receptions leader at a point. So if they want to bring him on for a really cheap deal, sure. If they were going to spend money on this guy, then I'm going to be out and upset about it. Speedster Gamez. Has there been any news on what the Broncos could get for Garett Bolles? I haven't heard any sort of buzz of teams reaching out or inquiring about Garett Bolles. Now, the Broncos definitely don't want that to get out, because if they can't find a trade partner for him, they don't want their starting left tackle rolling into OTAs and training camp knowing we tried to move you, we just couldn't find a good enough deal. I'm guessing the Broncos would pull the trigger on a trade if they got a second rounder for him. It's a bit counterintuitive, though. What's Denver's biggest need this offseason? Everyone, Bueller, offensive line. What's not a good idea to get your offensive line better? Trade away your best offensive. I think Quinn Miners is probably better at this point, but trade away your second best nevertheless. If they trade away Garett Bolles, I need a pinky promise from both Paytons that whatever pick they get for him will be used on an offensive tackle. But then you got to find a new right tackle. So I think they'd only do it if the pick compensation is right. Hey, if you want to get on a future Mailbag show, all you got to do is subscribe. That way you don't miss the call when it goes out that we're doing a live Broncos show, and your questions can be on screen. So if you haven't subbed yet, please go ahead and do so. We're trying to grow the channel, so all Broncos fans watching right now, hit the sub button. And hey, if you're already subbed, send it to a friend. Send it to a family member. Say, come support and watch this awesome growing Broncos YouTube channel. Garrett Ringy with the next question. What's up, Garrett? Should we get a quarterback maybe in free agency? Yes. Brett Rippon cannot be the backup quarterback next year. Grip and rip, it's fun. It was a good backup if you thought you never had to play him. But honestly, he wasn't an absolute disaster. He wasn't like a Malik Willis last year. But Sean Payton is not going to be so hesitant to pull the plug on Russ like Hackett was. If Russ really starts to sink, Sean Payton's going to want some sort of backup that is playable. Names that come to mind, like Jacoby Brissett, Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, right? The guys that are looking to go to quarterback rehab for a little bit, sit behind Russ and learn from Sean Payton and get a starting gig elsewhere the next year. Michael H., any word on who's all interested in trading for Courtland Sutton? Teams that come to mind, the Chicago Bears at the first and foremost, because if any team is looking to trade away a player, the Bears definitely have a need. They've got a need at every single position this year. The Bears definitely come to mind. I wonder if the Cowboys would be interested. They like CeeDee Lamb, but then there's not a whole lot after CeeDee Lamb. And maybe Jerry Jones, that ticking clock, that's his life, he decides, I would like to try and win a Super Bowl while I'm still here and having McGriddles with 1 billion pounds of salt on it. So maybe those two teams, those are two destinations that come to mind. Also, the Ravens, anytime you're interested in, anytime there's a wide receiver available, the Ravens always pick up the phone because they have no good wide receivers. Holy smokes, speaking of Jerry Jones. The new regime may not be sold on Javonte Williams. What about signing David Montgomery? Former Chicago Bears running back, I guess current, whatever. But Monty for the Bears, former Iowa State Cyclone. In 4 seasons in the Windy City, he rushed for 3,600 yards. He had some flare-ups with injuries on and off during his time with the Bears. Was always somewhat good to miss 3-ish games a season. Decently good receiving back, 1,200 receiving yards, 30 total touchdowns. I like Montgomery. If the Broncos go out and sign him, I think that puts a nail in the Javonte Williams coffin as a long-term player for this team. Williams is probably going to be a bit of a shell of himself in 2023, and then 2024 will be the last year of his deal. It'll be hard for him to prove himself as an every down back for this team moving forward if Montgomery is also on the roster as well. But let me know, should the Broncos pay $10+ million for a running back this offseason? Montgomery's probably going to go in the neighborhood of like 3 years, $32 million, something like that. Would you be interested in giving up $10 million a season on a running back? We got more questions to answer in just a second, but quick, a first word from our sponsor today, Fanatics, with this awesome zip-up hoodie that's on sale 25% off when you go to chatsports.com/BroncosZip. That link's in the comments and the description of today's show. Still a bit nippy out there, so rep your favorite squad while also staying warm going into the spring with this Broncos hoodie. Alessandro Rhymes next up on the show. Don't you think we should target a running back in the draft? Our backfield is nothing but a bunch of practice squad players. Yeah, we can actually pull up. I don't know. We don't have the Broncos running back. It's okay. But you're right. Latavius Murray's a free agent. Javonte Williams is going to miss half the season. There's Chase Edmonds. There's Tyler Beatty. There's Demaria Crockett. There is, exactly what you're pointing out, a bunch of practice squads. They have to address this position. One, we have to give Russell Wilson a good running platform to lean on, because letting Russ cook for the whole year last year didn't work out well. Turns out Seattle may have been right all along about that. So whether it's in the draft or free agency, the issue is I would say I lean draft because it's going to be a lot cheaper that way. But right now they only have 5 picks in the draft. So what are they going to do? Use 20% of their draft capital on a running back? They've got bigger needs potentially. But in free agency, you're kind of in for an overpay. I'm not opposed to just running it back with Latavius Murray, right? Give him a vet minimum contract and ask him to hold down the fort until Javonte Williams returns. But even then, Williams is not going to be 100%. Derek Simpson, what's up, man? Should the Broncos trade up for Hendon Hooker in the draft? Saw a report that a handful of teams had a good long meeting with Hendon Hooker. My alma mater quarterback, Tennessee, tore his ACL in November, and the reports are that he's in line to be ready for a training camp. But Hendon Hooker, if he falls to round 3, I don't hate that pick. It definitely doesn't help you win now, though, because that would be a pick for him to sit for a year and take over for Russ after next season if 2023 does not go well for number 3. The issue is Hendon Hooker's a bit of an older guy. He just turned 25, so if he does not play next year and he more or less redshirts next year, 2023, well, he turned 26 in January. You're going to have a 26-year-old second-year quarterback. By the time his rookie contract is up, his second deal, he'll be about 30 years old, kind of like A.J. Johnson, who Denver didn't bring back. Different positions, but I think the point remains, are the Broncos interested in giving out a second contract to an older quarterback, or they rather just go young? DCX Viper, sign out rivals best running back Josh Jacobs. No, I don't. I think you might be a bit foolish for an overpay after one really good season from Jacobs. But the Raiders didn't pick up his 5th-year option for 2 reasons. One, they're really dumb. 2, he didn't necessarily earn the 5th year. I would have given it because it's another year of a cheap running back, more or less. But I'm not opposed to the idea of sticking it to Vegas, but I just don't think Denver is going to be able to swing for a $15 million running back contract. And how do most running back second contracts work out? Not well. Ask the Cowboys about it with Zeke. So I would probably pass on giving Jacobs what he's looking for in free agency.